And we're live.
We are live!
Buddy, you're back.
I'm back, man.
Mate, it's almost as if you've literally gone to the shower, changed the shirt, and come back and we've got different beers.
It's movie magic.
But no, you're actually back. It's a different episode, right?
It is, yeah. Can you believe it? We made it.
I can believe it. All right,
Back by unpopular demand. Oh, this guy. Here we go. You're not even doing it to the camera. It's just... No. I'm doing some weights over here. Look at this big boy.
Look at that tricep curl.
Friday night.
It's not even a
lights,
curl.
Baby.
Jeez Louise. What have you been doing during this quarantine, man?
What have I been doing? Man, just trying to not lose my mind.
So what is that?
It's Groundhog Day. I don't know about you, man, but it's Groundhog Day for me. Like, I was glad that you asked me to come and just to talk to you.
I'm bored, man.
And talk about something that, you know, can stimulate my mind a little bit, jog the memory.
Chang always stimulates the mind.
Okay, money.
All right, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay, mate. Before we begin, again, to support the channel, guys, what do I need to do to get to subscribe? Just click on the damn bell button, right?
Take your shirt off, man.
Damn, we're not ready yet.
People will be ringing that bell.
You know what? Okay, so what I've been seeing in this quarantine time, there's a lot of crazy thing, right? Like people like choking each other for toilet paper and all that shit. Like that's
Look,
right?
it is from the suburb that I live in.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. But yes, you're right.
Debatable.
Yeah.
And I've seen people with like the working from home flex. So for you white collar guys, it means like showing off like your working from home setup. Oh, I've got this mad
I've seen
computer, all that bullshit. I've just lost it, but it's the quarantine bod, mate. It's either you're going to two extremes. Either you've absolutely lost the plot and you're day drinking, which, you know, it's not necessarily the day now.
I'm wearing a loose shirt for a reason. I've drank a bit too much VB myself.
Or you're going in the extreme. Mate, we had a good chat about the capoeira stuff a couple of days ago, mate, and I had to bring you back about martial arts as a whole.
Yep.
Apparently you're a subject matter expert.
Look, I wouldn't say expert.
Yeah.
As Henry Rollins says, he's a jackass of all trades.
Yeah,
I think that could be me in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I like the jackass bit.
I think, like, living in Japan for such a long time, I was exposed to like martial. Like I know it's the word not to be thrown around here on an MMA channel, but pro wrestling.
Oh, fuck, bastard. Sorry, man.
Yeah. So that's the response that I would expect.
Yep.
I love my pro wrestling ever since I was a kid. I saw you had one of your friends on. He's a Australian local pro wrestler.
Yep.
He had a really good insight on the local scene here.
Yep.
But he was involved in it. I'm the outsider looking in. So I love pro wrestling, but once I went to Japan, you kind of learn the crossover between MMA and pro wrestling.
What do you mean by that?
So everybody, if you say pro wrestling, everybody thinks WWE. Like,
yep.
And, you know, as well, should.
Isn't that it?
They're the ones.
It's prime time, right?
They're the prime time. But of course, we're in a Western country. We get that Western pro wrestling. There's this whole genre of pro wrestling that unless you go digging for it, you won't find it.
Yep.
So Japanese pro wrestling is on fire right now worldwide. Like,
how big is that market, man?
Man, it
can't be that big.
Well, fuck. How do I explain? Like they just exploded. Japanese wrestling's always been there. Yeah. As long as American pro wrestling has been there, but. Why would you get that exposure? Like to find the stuff, you literally had to trade tapes back in the day. Like some guy got a VHS and he bootlegged it. And then if you knew somebody, that's how you would find out about this stuff. It wasn't so mainstream where now you have YouTube, you have all these things. Japanese pro wrestling plays a pivotal role in martial arts. I say that loosely. Don't kill me for saying that. Loosely. That's all I want to say. Because Japanese approach pro wrestling a lot differently than the Westerners or the Americans do. Yep. Wrestling here in Australia is heavily influenced from the American style. But, what is, let me ask you, man, the reason, if I say the word pro wrestling and you have that reaction, why is that so? What makes you just go, fucking pro wrestling?
Well, that reaction, and it's just a personal bias on myself.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Fake tough guy.
Keep going.
Is that if I'm gonna watch a sport, it better be real. So Fijian, love rugby. The element of rugby that I like is the physical contact of it.
Bros just thrown down.
Just dudes just willing to lose their IQ.
Yeah. So, but basically, you're like, the reason you have that sour taste in your mouth of pro wrestling is because you're just like, oh my God, this guy's fighting over that guy's girlfriend, and that guy kicked the baby, and there's these theatrics that go with it that make a stigma.
Yeah,
they create this stigma of pro wrestling. Then it's just like the amount of times that I've seen people come in with that pre-notion of fuck wrestling, pro wrestling, and then they'll see like Japanese wrestling, for example, and they'll just be like, what the fuck is this? This is pro wrestling? That's not what the hell is this? He's actually beating the shit out of that guy. There's an element of Japanese wrestling where it's like, the reason I say it's connected to martial arts over there, it's like they're Japanese. They love martial arts. Bushido is the thing over there. Budo, the fighting, the martial arts, it's so near and dear to them. It's like they wouldn't cheapen it, and if they did, they would minimize the damage, right? So martial arts is tantamount the pride of Japanese sport. They produce these fantastic fighters, the way they train their fighters, the dojo mentality, the rigorous training that they go through is like second to none. So if they were to apply that into now professional wrestling, they don't just go at it like, okay, well, let's just put on this corny show. Like, they attack it as serious as they do as martial arts. And if I did show you some Japanese wrestling, you'd be like, okay, that looks better than American style. I'm not just going to categorize American wrestling to one company because there's like many. But that's where I think pro wrestling plays a pretty cool part in the Japanese culture, because they'll bring in Japanese fighters from Japanese martial arts. They've brought in Pride guys. They brought in Pancrase guys. The Pancrase guys now work in pro wrestling. Pancrase is back. And
what's Pancrase?
Okay, so here we go.
The fuck is that shit?
Let me just rant in this chat.
Making up shit.
I'll make up a bunch of stuff. You might have to Google.
I'm gonna fact check everything you're saying.
You can fact check all. Fat Shack. The Shack.
It was pretty fat. It was pretty fat.
Poor guy.
Not the Shack at work, by the way. You're alleged.
It's
my manager.
No, that guy. Yeah. Give this man more money.
Boy.
No, like, okay, where do I start, man? I could just rant about this stuff. Feel free to cut me off or chime in anytime you want. Like, there are. What is your? You love MMA. You love UFC.
Love it.
UFC is like the main
thing
that you go to.
Yep.
What other MMA companies do you watch?
Don't watch. Trying to get into it's interesting. Let me pare it back. So by the way, there was actually an season in my life that I actually liked WWE.
Everybody did.
That's what I mean. Right?
Everybody grew out of it except me. And like, here I am, the idiot that I am, never grew up.
Sponsored by Furphy. If you're watching, just holler at your boy.
I'll leave the links below. VB.
What the hell why are you drinking VB?
You used to watch.
Dude, you live in a country that has like good beer. Why are you drinking VB? Could we just
because
talk
it's
about
the
that?
virus beta.
Oh my god!
In these trying times.
Oh my god!
No, so you like, regardless of watching WWF in your past.
Yep. Is it WWF?
It was F. It was F back then.
Really?
It doesn't matter. It was a different.
God.
Anyways, so you used to watch pro wrestling, as all of us did in the late 90s. But how did you come across? Well, everybody I think came across UFC the same way. It just exploded onto the scene. It was always there, but at least in the Australian market, like, man, that shit blew up 10 years ago so hard, so fast.
Yeah.
And now you can't go to a pub on a Sunday afternoon
and not see it playing. If there's a pay-per-view there, I can't remember when it was, but I do recall they were playing it late at night on one channel. Yeah. It was old. It was really old reruns.
Foxtel or?
It wasn't Foxtel, mate.
Free TV.
Can't afford fucking Foxtel.
Right? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I didn't have. So like
it was free. I just don't know what it was.
So you watch UFC now.
Yeah.
But how much of the past do you know? How much of it are you, like, once you found UFC and you fell in love with it?
Yeah.
Did you just, like, you were off and running from there, and like you've only progressed that far? How far back does your knowledge
go? Yeah, good question. So here's the thing, right?
Because this is the angle that I want to take.
And here's the thing with life as a whole, in the sense that you can appreciate now in its present and you can look to the future without looking to the past to form an appreciation on something.
No, I'm not saying you.
No,
you don't.
definitely. There's hopefully an overarching reason that I'm going the long route. But the short of it, and it's interesting that in this COVID environment, every major sports league has gone to a halt.
Taking it, man.
Everything, right? So what are they doing? They're going back to the vault, right?
Everyone's
going back to the vault.
Yeah, they are.
And it's really sort of interesting. Like I asked you if you watched the MJ documentary, to which you said the only MJ in my life is homeboy with a hat. So that's cool. I'm all about that fucking thrill of life.
R.I.P. MJ. R.I.P. MJ.
I don't know why I feel the need of doing this, but it's all good. Anyway, I guess the short of it is I felt no need to look to the past about the UFC.
There's no reason to.
I was appreciating the present. But
sure.
the more and more we get stuck in a time like this where you don't have any new content, and that's the thing. We're in an environment, currency, and economy of now, present, new. I need new. You're looking at a YouTube video while clicking on 3 others and loading them. You can't even fucking appreciate whatever is loading now. You know what I mean? What's the next? What am I going to see next? And same thing. And that's what's happening now. And I feel like that's been my consumption pattern to date. But I think...
So you're doing the slow catch up.
Yeah. That's the short of it.
But in no way, shape or form am I saying that you don't have an appreciation of the past. That's not what I mean. But, there are some that, hey man, I just discovered this thing and it's on every weekend now. Oh man, like this shit's so cool. Wow, man, on the days that it's not on, I'm going to go back and be a historian about this stuff. You either are or you aren't. It just depends.
It's a mindset, right? Like it's how you're wired.
But that's fine. But in no way, shape or form are you like not appreciative of the past. So what I mean is like I started watching cage fighting when... So Ken Shamrock was in the WWF when we were kids.
Yep.
And they always used to say, he's the ultimate fight champion. He did this, he did that. He's the fighter.
Yep.
And when you're a little kid, like we would have been like 8 or 9 years old, you're watching pro wrestling and you think it's real. So, but they keep talking about this dude. And you're like, Ken Shamrock, why is Ken Shamrock? He's a fighter. I'm like, but what about these guys? These guys are fighters too. You learn what everything is.
Just on an off tangent, Homeboy's on the gear, right?
You know what?
Look at the photo of him now. He's on the gear. He's on the gear.
Fuck, he looks
I'm
good.
fucking
he looks
sorry.
Good, eh? He's like 50 something.
He's on the gear. He's on whatever the Rock is on.
Hey,
and it's not those pancakes. It's on the gear.
Don't you talk shit about my homeboy.
I'm
Dwayne.
not talking shit. I'm just saying they're both on the fucking gear.
Don't step on those toes.
They both put something.
Yo, The Rock beat the shit out of Ken Shamrock back in the day. God damn, that chair shot.
I love The Rock days.
Yeah. So, anyways, like Ken Shamrock was like the UFC dude, and they kind of brought in Dan Severn.
Yep, I'm familiar with those names. Yeah.
Mustache Man.
Not familiar with that.
But Dan Severn, yeah, the mustache.
Oh yeah, mustache.
Fantastic mustache.
Yeah.
So then, he ended up going back to... Ken Shamrock went back to the UFC and he fought Tito Ortiz.
Yep.
And like Tito Ortiz was this young gun that just beat the shit out of him. So I was watching UFC in the early 2000s and then I would find like it blew my mind because I'm like, these guys are fighting in this cage.
Yeah, man.
And like I remember seeing the gloves for the first time because like up until that point I was like 12 or 13.
Yep.
When you see fighting sports with gloves, it was boxing gloves.
Yep.
Like you didn't... Taekwondo kind of had these, like, but the first time I ever saw like a pair of MMA gloves, I was like, what the shit is this? And it was the cage setup, the whole thing of it all. And the UFC used to have these big stage entrances like wrestling.
Yep.
Like they used to have this humongous elongated octagon with the huge UFC, and the fighters would come out and like down this ramp and shit, because at the time Pride was like the biggest thing in Japan, and Pride shed no expense when it came to their setups. Like
the production was sick,
the production is incredible. So I guess UFC kind of, I watch UFC now, and they just come out the tunnel. And like I hear people talking about like, oh no, they like just seeing them come through the tunnel and what a fighter looks like before they hit the ring. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. The wrestling in me wants to see the stage kind of
presence.
That's not the point. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I found cage fighting at a young age when everybody was like, oh, it's fucking gay. Those two guys are on the floor. Like, what are they doing? And I'm just like, okay, man, like. Fast forward 10 years later, these are the same people, my friends, are saying to me, look, UFC is the coolest shit ever, man. It's the best. And I'm just like, fuck all of you, man. You fucking ripping on me 10 years ago.
Hold on.
So anyways, it wasn't just UFC that I'd saw. Like you could get magazines in the news agency, and I would get like these cage fighting magazines, and then you would see these Vale Tudo Brazilian fighting tournaments, the no holds barred tournaments. They had the Japanese stuff in the magazines, and then we used to have those book fairs. Remember, like when the Olympics was over and done with, and there would be those commercials on TV. It's like $5, everything $5, and you go to this warehouse in Olympic Park, and they would just have like all this shit they're trying to get rid of. Once in a while, they would have these book fairs. So there was UFC, there was King of the Cage, there was Pride, and like what's his name? Eddie Bravo was doing commentating for King of the Cage at the time. And
how young would have Eddie Bravo been then, man?
He was young, man. He was young. I saw what he looks like now. He still looks good, I think. But when you see him in like the early 2000s, he's just like cool, man. Like Eddie Bravo.
Eddie Bravo's 50 years old. He looks good.
He looks good.
He doesn't look like a 50-year-old.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Asian don't raisin.
Is he Asian?
Is he? He looks.
Nah. He's like Mexican, surely.
I always thought he was Asian. Is he Filo or something? Like Filipino?
Let's find out, mate.
Man, I thought he was Asian. I don't know. Whatever. That's not the point. Yeah. So like I was exposed to all this stuff, and then I heard about Pride in Japan.
Yeah.
And then you would hear like Quinton and Rampage Jackson's fighting in Pride, and he would do power bombs and knock people out because the rules were a lot looser.
Yep.
You could soccer kick people in the head. And then I would watch Pride and be like, oh, okay. Then they would interview Rampage, and he'd be like, oh, I love the Steiner brothers.
Yep.
And like he would just drop these pro wrestlers.
Who's that? Pro wrestlers.
Yep. These dudes. And then I was like, okay, so like pro wrestling was my thing.
Yep.
But I would always have my finger on the pulse when it came to like MMA stuff in the early 2000s. And then when I was a kid, I had seen like the American wrestling had brought over these Japanese dudes and put them on the show every once in a while.
Yep.
And you're like, who the fuck are these guys? Like Japan? They have wrestling in Japan? You're like, okay, cool. So fast forward, here I am now, like 31. I lived in Japan. I knew what the stuff was back in the day, and I have appreciation for all these Japanese fighters and Japanese fighting as a whole, like the way it was presented in the history and the lineage of it all. But it feeds into pro wrestling in Japan so much that they do business with each other. Like there was so many pro wrestlers in Japan now that had dabbled in MMA in Japan. Like they had fights in these companies, and 9 times out of 10 they got beaten up because they weren't really trained. It was kind of like what happened to CM Punk.
Yeah.
They gave him the benefit of the doubt.
I haven't watched these fights, but yeah. Well, they gave him the benefit of the doubt because
they gave him the benefit of the doubt.
Bring people to watch it. Yeah.
No, but for his skill as well, because like the guy does.
You reckon?
The guy does. No, well, that's what I'm saying. They gave him the benefit of the doubt because he does train.
Yeah.
BJJ.
Yeah. Okay.
Like so many wrestlers care about MMA, and they so many wrestlers, American wrestlers, do BJJ on the side.
Yep.
On their downtime. So like, you put him in there, and he got his ass kicked because he doesn't do it every day. He did everything the right way in a respect, but he doesn't do it every day.
Yep.
Where these fighters do. So the Japanese wrestlers that would go into MMA, they didn't last very long because they would just get mauled by these actual fighters.
Yep.
But in the reverse side of that, they would bring in the real fighters and put them on wrestling shows. And there was this generation of Japanese pro wrestling where it was kind of like tit for tat. Like,
what do you mean?
Where like the wrestlers would go and do MMA for real, but they would lose because they're not trained that professionally for whatever reason. But then they would bring in the real fighters, and they would lose to the wrestlers because then the wrestling fans would be like, "Fuck, he beat Bas Rutten." But in real life, like Bas Rutten is like my favorite MMA fighter of all time, or martial artist of all time.
Yeah,
that's my next question. Like the generation before, do you know Bas Rutten? Do you know Sakuraba? You know who Rampage Jackson is. Everybody knows who Rampage is. Like there's a bunch of Japanese guys like Minoru Suzuki. Do you know Josh Barnett? Like Josh Barnett would fight in Japan, and he was a legend. Don Fry was this mega star. Bob Sapp. Do you know anything about Bob Sapp?
Familiar with
the names?
Barnett.
Yeah, because Barnett's still relevant.
Yeah. He's in wrestling now, right? Like he's doing a lot.
No.
More.
Josh Barnett had like he. So here we go. This is this is why I thought this episode could be cool, because I can just cross-reference like MMA and wrestling, whether MMA fans like it or not. Pro wrestling will always be there, lurking in the shadows.
Yeah.
You can hate it as much as you want, and that is fine. It doesn't piss me off at all. If any wrestling fan gets annoyed that MMA people don't take us seriously as wrestling fans, fucking grow up, man. Grow up. It's pro wrestling.
Have a beer.
Whatever. Yeah, have a beer and shut the fuck up. Have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up. So, like Josh Barnett promotes pro wrestling shows.
Yeah. He's like a promoter.
But man, he promotes these shows where there's no ring ropes.
So where they're wrestling in?
So that's what I'm saying, man. It can be done so cool, because he brings in these before, like now WWE kind of signed all these guys that had popularity on the independent scene.
Yeah.
So for example, Matt Riddle.
Yeah.
Like he had a cup of coffee in the UFC, right?
Yeah.
I didn't see any of his MMA fights, but before he got signed to WWE, he was a former UFC guy, became a pro wrestler. He was killing it. He had a good fan base, but he was legit.
Yeah.
So Josh Barnett would book him on these Bloodsport style shows where they have a wrestling ring, but they would get like all the pro wrestlers that were real. Yep. The real shoot fighting pro wrestlers. They would have these, pro wrestling matches in the Bloodsport style presentation. Yep. And the fans loved it, man. They were all wrestling fans. They weren't martial arts fans, so to speak. Yeah. They were there for the draw of pro wrestling. And the beauty of pro wrestling is like, it's a double-edged sword when it comes to MMA, because you watch any pro wrestling now as opposed to 20 years ago, so many people try to implement fighting or like real fight techniques and stuff like that to their pro wrestling, because pro wrestling is all about the drama, the crowd reaction, the milking of something to get a reaction, and I'm in so much pain and all that kind of stuff to get the crowd on your side. Yep. It's funny though, because Bas Rutten, like I said, he did some pro wrestling in Japan, and they put him with one of their wrestlers who was like the fighter wrestler. If I've watched all of Bas's fights and I love his style of kickboxing, his Dutch kickboxing, but you know how good he is in real life, and he would just beat the shit out of these people, and like he's the coolest guy ever. But then when I saw him in a pro wrestling match, it doesn't look right, because pro wrestling is like they gave him the skinny on how this works. And like I'm sure like you saw the people in his corner were like pro wrestlers, so they would have showed him the ropes and taught him what was what to get him through it. It's not a long half an hour match, but you can still see moments of him just like, if you watch any of his real fights and you watch him do pro wrestling, he's like a fish out of water.
Yeah, of course.
He did a great job, right? Like there are some like MMA dudes that do pro wrestling and it's just like, it doesn't look. Yeah. Because
what aspect of it though? The technical aspect?
Yeah, because like there's just basic stuff where it's like, in pro wrestling, your movement and your the way you move, like, when we were talking about capoeira, and capoeira has to be fluid. It has to. It's a different thing. It's the same for pro wrestling, man. Yeah. Like pro wrestling, you got to be fluid. Like when a wrestler's shit because they're so rigid and they're not smooth. Like you're simulating the art of combat, but you still have to be an artist to do it.
It's a language.
It is, definitely. Like you'll know good pro wrestling when you see it, and if you see rough and rugged, raw kind of pro wrestling, you just kind of like. Ugh.
Yeah, I think
and there's elements of that, like in the Bas. Like I'm just singling him out because I watched it the other day, and I remember watching it because I was watching. I love Bas Rutten. He's the man.
No, we're singling him out. Like
I love him. He's the man.
Alex wants to fight you.
El Guapo. Anyways, he you could tell like he did a really good job, but there were moments where he could have he's just like, well, fuck, because he's trying to go through the steps, the process of a pro wrestling match. Okay, next I got to do this. Next I got to do that. So like he's not so fluid where he can easily just be like, okay, this next thing's coming, but I'm feeding for it. Like so. But pro wrestling in Japan is treated very seriously. I mean, there are companies where they take it a comedy route and they treat it like entertainment a little bit more. But the main popular companies, there's more than one, they treat it seriously. And like, if you want to be a pro wrestler in Japan, the difference is so when you had your friend on here on the previous episode, he's like, oh man, I just looked up a local wrestling school and, they give you a chance and you try out and you give it your best. In Japan, you don't just Google the local wrestling fed and sign me up, brother. Like, it doesn't work that way. You have to find out if they usually take them young, fresh out of high school, because they need to mold you in a dojo. So by the time you're in your early 20s, they can put you into the show or the limelight, and then you work your way up. You don't walk in like Brock Lesnar did in pro wrestling and just light the world on fire. You know, in Japan, you work. It's a system. They treat it so seriously, and it's a dojo, as if a real martial arts dojo. So, yeah, they take it serious. They treat it with respect. You pay your fucking dues in pro wrestling in Japan, man. So, I feel like if I did show you some Japanese pro wrestling, you would have a little bit more of appreciation of pro wrestling and how it can be done. But in no way, shape, or form am I going to try and convert you to a pro wrestling fan. Because tomorrow you're going to see some American wrestling on TV, perhaps, and just be like, "Oh fuck, what the fuck is this?" Like, unfortunately, that's the disservice that some of us get from it. But
I mean, I can only base things on what I can see, which is this beer bottle at the moment. Fuck, for it's pretty good.
Well, for example, like MMA heroes left UFC for WWE. Cain Velasquez, Brock Lesnar, even though he came from pro wrestling. Ronda Rousey dabbled in pro wrestling. And then she put out a tweet last week and pissed everybody off. That's great. I think that's great.
I think that's marketing, to be honest.
The greatest thing to me is when pro wrestling fans get so G'd up and annoyed with shit. Oh, it makes my day.
But they get G'd up.
Yeah, I know, because they're wound so tight because they
love it. But that's the sign of a good fan base. So that's actually a good sign of a really good fan base.
Speaking of fan base, though, I would love to hit on this. You go to, where do you watch your UFC? You go to the pub? You stay home? What do you do?
I usually go to the pub, but if not, I find legal streams. Legal streams on the internet via the UFC.
Legal
hey man, I paid for fucking the fight pass, right? So Dana White, I want my money back.
But what I'm saying is, when you're at the pub around, because like I said, you can't not go to the pub on a Saturday or Sunday when a UFC is on and find a seat or find a car space. It's so popular.
So getting that.
That environment, when you're around MMA fans, what's that like for you? Do you riff-raff with people? Is everybody all broed up and they fucking think they know everything? And
good question.
Because in Bankstown, everyone fucking thinks they know everything. Oh, smashing, bro. Everyone thinks they know.
It's twofold. And maybe I have a bit of a superiority complex, which, Simon Payton, shout out to you if you're watching. You probably know all about that. All right. No, just joking. I'm joking. No, but I guess
it's the camaraderie.
Yeah, it's good camaraderie. Like, it's twofold. One, you have these group of bros that are watching it, and then that's fine. Same with wrestling. But then, like, a lot of times you strike up conversations with people that, generally are of different walks of life, but appreciate the art that is
But you have a witty back and forth.
Yeah, it's great.
Hey, that guy likes that fighter. No, man, I think this guy's gonna win.
Yeah.
But there's a respect there, and you don't. Do you ever go home just like, oh, fucking MMA fans? Like, because what I mean is I'll go to wrestling, like every pro wrestling fan fucking thinks they know everything. They think they know everything. And the reason they do that is because the curtain has been pulled back so much in the advent of the internet. The internet is like one of the worst things that could have happened to pro wrestling. Like, because they pulled the curtain back so much where it's like everybody knows it's a show now, and people work like they work the fans to a point where...
What do you mean by when you say work the fans?
They work like pro wrestling is all about eliciting a response. You're a good guy, you're a bad guy. So you're going to work that crowd to get the reaction that you need. The wrestlers, they also pull the curtain back and they let the fans in when they should be really protecting the business. So the beauty of Japanese wrestling, here we go again, they really hold it close to the chest. It's you're hard pressed to get inside goss or like see behind the curtain in Japanese wrestling. I have a friend, he's a famous wrestler in Japan. He is a big Tongan guy. And he made it really big. He paid his dues the hard way. He's done everything the right way. He's an OG.
When you say paid your dues, what is that exactly?
Going through that system of like, okay, they scouted him from rugby. Hey, do you want to give pro wrestling a try? He's like, sure. They put him through the ringer, through the dojo. He's the first foreigner to go through the dojo system and succeed. So he plays a bad guy on TV. And I know him in real life now. I've been very fortunate to know him, and he's the coolest guy in real life. Like, he's a sweetheart in real life. Like, I'm sorry if I've said too much, but the mystique of his character, we would hang out at his local bar that he owned.
Yep.
And he's a big, gigantic Tongan in Tokyo. People are going to recognize him.
Yep.
He stands out like a sore thumb.
Yep.
Fans every once in a while would walk past and shit bricks because they're just like, holy fuck, that's him. And then they would like, do I approach him? What do I do? Can I ask him for a picture?
Yeah.
And like, he's a sweetheart in real life, but people would come over and just be like, like the Japanese people are trembling in fear to approach him. And then as soon as they do, he's just like, oh yeah, cool, no worries. You want a picture? Yeah, let's take a picture. He poses with them, and then they just go, oh, thank you so much. And like, they walk away like in disbelief that they made it out alive because this guy's going to eat them.
Yeah.
But it's hilarious to see because in Japan they protect the business.
Yep.
They protect it so much. Where in America they have revealed so much about the inner workings of pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Somebody I can't remember if it was a musician or an actor, some Hollywood person, but they made a comment once where they're like, the audience is now on the stage in anything in life.
On the stage.
On the stage.
Yeah, right.
So in anything, not pro wrestling, they're talking about like
everything. Yeah.
Because now every dickhead has a phone.
Yep.
World star, like everybody just, anybody with a camera phone tries to be famous.
Yep.
Everybody's looking for this shit. So like, it's like the actual people that are in the entertainment industry, the curtain has been pulled back so much for pro wrestling where like now the fans, the viewer, the audience is on the stage, and it shouldn't be that way. So that's where the stigma of like pro wrestling hurts the industry, but it thrives on it because now the wrestlers, like, they get a bigger fan base if they let the fans in a little bit, like, oh, that guy's cool, that guy sucks, but that guy's cool because haha, wink wink, nudge nudge, we're all in on it together.
Yeah. What is it though? You say we're all in on it. What is that? What are you talking about?
The wrestling business, like pro wrestling, everybody now knows that it's a show. Yep. But why do Western fans treat it with such disrespect when in Japan the fans still treat it with a magnitude of respect?
That's a cultural thing though. That's how the Japanese
are.
Exactly.
It is a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And here in the Western world, everybody's, I guess, I don't know if it's a millennial thing. I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know if everybody now just has this self-entitlement and they put themselves in these, I think we're steering off topic here, but to get back to like MMA, so the original point was Ronda Rousey sends out this tweet. Yeah. And the fucking wrestling I loved it. The wrestling fans were so annoyed. So I do stand in the same position as that other guy that you had on here, and he's like, they call pro wrestling fake. Yeah. It fucking hurts. I'll hit you in the head with a chair. I'm just like, yeah, pro wrestling takes a toll on your body. Yeah. The F word gets thrown around so much. It's just like, well, don't get so pissed off about people using the F word because they're just people that don't know what pro wrestling is. So that it's predetermined. They can script it, but yeah, it takes a toll on your body. But if pro wrestling was so crap, why are these MMA people involving themselves in it, and vice versa? So in Japan, there are all these people. I'll rifle off some names and just tell me again. So you don't know what Pancrase was? Nope. There's a guy called Minoru Suzuki, and he's a real fighter. Yep. And he had a partner. He was also a fighter, Masa Funaki. Yep. They started a company called Pancrase. So during the time of Pride, during the time of UFC, starting like, the embryonic stage of UFC, there was another company in Japan called Pancrase.
So this is
Pancrase was another fight company, a legitimate fight company. Yep. Bas Rutten fought in Pride and was the champion. Pancrase was a company that they had one round.
One round?
And it was like half an hour or something like that. So like Bas tells this story where he's like, okay, how many rounds? One. Fantastic. How long's the round? Half an hour? He's just like, oh fuck, okay. Like,
Sign me up.
So like the Japan is cool for like freak show fights as well, where like they would put Bob Sapp against this dude like the size of you and I. And like just
they don't do weight class like,
and just pay them stupid amounts of money, like duffel bags of cash, because the Yakuza were running it. And
well, wasn't the Yakuza a decent funding source for Pride as well?
Yeah. The Yakuza had their hand in pro wrestling, MMA,
all of the combat stuff.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, like the early 2000s. If you watch pro wrestling in Japan, you just see like these meaty, chisel-jawed Japanese dudes in these brown suits. And you're like, well, that guy's a wrestling fan? Who's that guy? You're just like, okay, some shady shit went down for a little while. But all those guys can tell you that story. I'm not going to regurgitate that. But they would just pay these fighters these stupid sums of money just to have these freak show fights. Like I saw, do you know Don Fry?
Yep.
So Don Fry had that famous fight with Takayama. Everybody knows it. It's when there's two. It's like the most manliest fight you'll ever see. And it's just those two guys just dropping bombs.
Yep.
Don Fry also fought Akebono, and Akebono is a sumo champion. He's a legitimate sumo champion in Japan. And he dabbles in pro wrestling in Japan as well.
Yep.
And they had those two fight. So like Japan is just this wonderland of fighting. So when I was living there, I lived in the sumo suburb.
Yep.
In East Tokyo.
There's a suburb?
Well, there's suburbs everywhere.
Yeah, but a sumo. What's the sumo suburb exactly?
Well, like where all the wrestling and the fighting take place in predominantly. In Tokyo is a area, has like many train stations, but everybody knows it as like the Korakin area, Tsurubashi Station.
The prefectures, right?
No, that's just like the local area. The governing suburb has like a bigger name, the council, whatever. But a few stations from there, if you cross the river, the Samida River, I was living in Ryogoku, and Ryogoku is where all the sumo arena is. And all the sumo stables are in that suburb as well.
Yep.
So I would just go to do my local groceries every day, and I would just see like sumos riding bikes, sumos riding bicycles. Just imagine that.
I just want to
imagine that, man. It's the coolest shit you've never seen.
Poor bicycle.
And then I saw a taxi one time just like driving down the street, and like it was so low to the ground, and it was driving so slow, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on with this taxi? They stop in front of me.
Rider.
They stop in front of me, and like these three sumo dudes get out, and I'm just like, what the fuck? And then I would see them like sumos. They've all got these hot wives, these super hot wives.
It's a caste thing.
If you're a sumo in Japan, like man, you're like a god.
Yeah, like it's a caste thing.
It's a category of celebrity.
Of course.
Nothing about.
To be that fat.
So it was cool. Like I would live in that suburb, and I would see sumo everywhere. And even in the sumo arena down the street, they would pro wrestling book it out predominantly out of the year. So I've been there so many times watching pro wrestling.
Yeah.
But they would book a sumo guy against a kung fu guy, or a sumo guy against the
cross disciplines
American boxer, like in the freak show fights.
Okay. Yeah.
But I had gone to proper MMA. Eventually I made friends with Mr. Takizawa. Shout out to Mr. Takizawa.
Yep.
Team Takizawa. I missed them.
Yeah.
He was involved in the MMA in Japan, in Tokyo. So now the advent of Pride going away, Ryzen is the company.
Yep, familiar with. That's the one that what's his name? Mayweather fought in, right?
Did he? Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, I was there.
You were there?
No, I was in Japan when Mayweather was. It was in New Year's Eve, right? Yeah, I was there for New Year's Eve when that happened. Yeah. I was in town, and so Ryzen has these other little companies underneath them. So they have a smaller MMA group called Deep.
Yep.
Japan is like the best for like random names. So Deep. What does it mean? I don't know. Does it stand for something?
Just go in deep.
Maybe. I don't know, but there's no F in there for fighting. Like, I don't know, but Deep. They have Deep, and then they have the girls' MMA called Jules.
As a separate promotion.
Yeah, so like Ryzen is like
the top.
The advent of Pride.
Yeah.
And kind of like, I don't know if it's the same people. I don't know who runs it, but it's like MMA is back in Japan.
Yep.
Now Ryzen is the big company.
Yep.
Then they have like a smaller division underneath. I guess to cut your teeth to make it to Ryzen.
Yep.
You cut your teeth in Deep.
Yep.
And the girls cut their teeth in Jules.
Yep.
So I would go to these cage fighting events in Tokyo, men's and women's. So the funny thing about women's pro wrestling in Japan and women's MMA in Japan, the girls go harder than the boys sometimes. Like
it's most of the times and everything.
See, like, okay, pro wrestling has a stigma, but if you watch girls pro wrestling in Japan.
Yeah.
Fuck, these girls are just killing each other. And then I was watching girls pro wrestling, like first row, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, like you're so close you can hear the deep, like the shit that they're brutalizing each other.
The thuds.
So you go to girls MMA, girls fighting, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, these girls have a rightful chip on their shoulder because they got some shit to prove.
Yeah, right.
And they would just beat the shit out of each other. And they also had this thing where, like, there was this girl, she must have been on some sort of human growth hormone. She looked like a fucking fridge. A woman looked like this fridge. It was
staunch.
It was ridiculous. And they put her in the ring
Yeah.
with some regular girl that you knew she was just getting mauled. And in this cage, I'm sitting there watching. It went like 3 or 4 rounds, and you knew this girl was just playing cat and mouse with this girl, but this girl got obliterated. Another one that I saw was this girl looked like she was a tween.
What does a tween mean?
A tween, like she's not a teenager yet, or maybe she.
Okay.
Maybe she was 13 or 12, or this girl was just like. So when they had the tail of the tape on the screen, there was this girl that looked like she could fuck some shit up, and then that had all of her stats and it had her age.
Yeah.
And then they had this girl that like shouldn't be fighting, and they didn't put her age. There's just 2 question marks. And I'm just like, okay, clearly some legal tender has been slipped under the table somewhere, and this gym just put this girl in this fight. And I'm just like, oh my God. And, it was what you expected it to be. But the girls, man, girls MMA in Japan is no laughing matter. But then again, like the girls that fight in UFC, like they're all legitimate girls that could break your balls.
Oh, yeah.
Just twist that shit off and rip it.
It's kind of like the Serena Williams effect, where like she could probably like beat half of the dudes
She probably could.
out on the circuit.
Yeah, she probably could.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. How?
Go ahead.
How much of the echoes of Pride? Like, what I want to understand is when Pride was there, because the UFC acquired Pride, right?
Yeah,
like at a certain point, and then they inherited like what was a freaking sick roster of fighters. Rampage Jackson, Wanderlei Silva. I can't even remember the other ones, but like they had a good stable, and that's what like what do you think caused those really top level fighters? Like, I mean, Rampage Jackson, like
it was an animal.
Yeah, it was an animal. Like
an animal.
Silva was an animal.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think caused him to go to Japan instead of
the money?
More money,
Man. Pride,
unregulated.
The Pride.
Yakuza cash,
look,
man.
Let's divide it into 2. Like, this is just my opinion. Let's divide it into 2 convincing things. It's like the money was there.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the rules were a lot laid back compared to America. Like the rules that
they had a boxing. It was square, right? Like
ring. It was a ring. It was a ring with like 5 ropes or 4 ropes or whatever, and guys would fall out of the ring. Fuck, it was fucking hilarious. And they were just the money was crazy, man. And they were drawing like Pride in its heyday was drawing like 50,000 people per show. Like, it was insane. But they weren't doing it every week like UFC is. Like they would book a show as they would. Like I don't know if it was once a month or bi-monthly, but Pride was really something special. Yeah, so the money was there, but they were drawing big business, and I think it's because they had good fighters that they would bring in from overseas, like the Europeans. They like Krokop, Mirko Krokop. He was in Pride. They had some good European fighters. They had really good American fighters that they would bring in, and then they had these like superstar Japanese fighters at the time that were just got like Sakuraba.
Yeah, so let me read like the top 10 apparently like Pride fighters that came to the UFC, right? Like, I mean, they were all came to freaking UFC. So number 10 is apparently Rampage. Apparently, he was the shittest of the lot.
But that was on like when Rampage was winding down, right?
Yeah. Then you have Sakuraba, who I'm familiar with, based on like Joe Rogan talking about this.
Sakuraba.
What do you mean you trained with? Are you serious?
I did a seminar with him.
Okay.
I've got a story about that too.
This guy. Shogun Rua. Shogun was
Mauricio.
Mark Coleman. Like I'm familiar with the name.
Yeah, man. Mark Coleman. He doesn't fight anymore, but fuck, he was juiced up back in the day. With mauled people.
Tekanaro Gomi. I'm familiar with that name.
Yeah, I know that guy. Yeah.
Wanderlei Silva, we know. Dan Henderson. Oh my God. Like, so they had a Crow Cop, number 3.
The legends, man.
Yeah.
Those legends.
Well, Nogueira, like
Nogueira.
the older one, like
Nogueira.
not the
Nogueira
but they all look freaking like they're 100 years old.
Nogueira beat the shit out of Sakuraba.
Yeah.
Pretty sure he did.
Fado, and like obviously everyone knows about Fado. He never lost in Pride. It says he's got Fado. It's like he's got a 14 in Pride. That is 14-0 record. Crazy.
Well, go back to Sakuraba because I love Sakuraba. If I love Bas Rutten in kickboxing, I love Sakuraba as my favorite Japanese fighter of all time, man. He's the Gracie Hunter. Do you know about that?
Nah.
So that's what I want to like. That's why I thought it was cool in this episode to just talk about some old stuff, people that you don't know about. Like these are the people that you do need to know about.
Yep.
And I would recommend them to you. So Bas Rutten's one, and Sakuraba's another, man. They would send the Gracies over to Japan, and Sakuraba would just run through them one by one.
In jiu-jitsu, right?
Well, no, it was Pride.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were coming in, like the Gracies were coming in, obviously doing jiu-jitsu, but Sakuraba was just like beating them at their own game.
Yeah, right.
And they would just send one after another, and he would just go through every fucking Gracie there. What that was his nickname. He was the Gracie Hunter. Yeah. And then the funny he had the theatrics as well. Like he would come out and he would do like these funny entrances, and the pro wrestling aspect comes in now too. And Sakuraba did cross over into pro wrestling. And he was a pro wrestler before he did fighting, and he had an aptitude for fighting and just lit the world on fire. But he would have these elaborate entrances in Pride because Pride had money to throw around. They would do it.
Yep.
And like there was one time, I don't remember who it was, but he got beaten by somebody, and in the post fight he was just like, oh, it's just like a bad dream. Like that loss is like a bad dream. So the next fight that he had to make up for the loss, he came out with like a pillow and he was in pajamas and he's like waking up from the bad dream.
Yeah, right.
And like now he's getting in the ring and he just like beats this guy that defeated him before. And I'm like, man, Sakuraba is so cool. He's in the UFC Hall of Fame.
Is he?
He is, yeah.
He's currently fighting in Ryzen, isn't he?
Yeah, they brought him in. So he would do pro wrestling, and I have seen him do pro wrestling. And then he still does fighting. Like he still fights.
How old would he be now?
Yeah, early 50s, I think.
Jeez Louise.
50, maybe like super early 50s perhaps. But he flew to America. So don't let me forget about his fighting fed now, because that's on the UFC channel, is like the pay to watch stuff. He has a fed now too. But
Fed? What do you mean by fed?
Like a fighting federation, like a fighting fed.
Sakuraba has his own fed.
Yeah, him and Josh Barnett.
What's it called?
Quintet.
You're
So
right.
they have a 5-on-5 tournament where it's like a team of 5 and they all fight another 5. It's like if you keep winning, you fight the next guy. And then when you lose, it's like King of Fighters. You ever play King of Fighters?
Yeah.
Like you have a team of so many people, and then if that guy wins, you beat all of them. And then if you lose, the next guy comes in. So
it's MMA though, right?
Yeah, it's MMA. It's MMA. It's in a giant, huge, like 12 meter by 12 meter mat. And it's like grappling, whatever you bring to the table. Like it's more grappling,
more grappling,
like shoot fighting kind of style, or catch wrestling and kind of stuff like that. So WF gym. So Sakuraba comes in fresh off the flight from America. The guy's probably jet lagged. Probably the last thing he wants to do is teach a seminar. And then he's so soft. Like when you see him on TV, he's so like this larger than life crazy character.
Yeah.
But when you talk to him, he's like, he talks like this, and he's really soft.
It's the Japanese dudes, right? Like they're just respectful.
But he's cool. He's Sakuraba, man. You're like, Jesus Christ. So then he starts. The seminar went out publicly, and that's how I found it as a fan. I'm just like, holy crap, he's doing a seminar. I need to go.
Yep.
So half the people were actually martial artists or grapplers.
Yep.
And because he was teaching catch wrestling, and then the other half were just like fans.
Yep.
That don't have an athletic bone in their body, and they showed up just to do this thing. And very quickly you could tell who was what. And then eventually they pair everybody off, and they started doing like wrestling, like submission wrestling drills. And I was really lucky to get paired up with this Japanese dude that was a martial artist.
Yep.
So he looked at me and he's like, you look like you know what you're doing. And I'm like, oh, I know a little bit of wrestling. Like, I think we'll be okay.
Yep.
And it's like, he couldn't figure out one thing that Sakuraba was teaching. And Sakuraba was like walking around, like making sure everybody's doing the right thing. And then like, he just goes, oh, Saku-san, like blah, 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 blah. And then Sakuraba just tells him to get out of the way and like starts demonstrating on me. And like, there's this picture that my friend took, and it's me just like on the mat, just like, what the fuck? And like Sakuraba's got my leg and he's like trying to demonstrate something. And I'm looking at my friend going, we're going to take a picture. I'll take a picture. And at the end of it, Sakuraba, you're allowed to take a picture with him in the end. And I know he's a funny dude, so I asked him. I'm like, oh man, can you put me in a headlock? And he's like, no. He's like, no, I'm sorry, they won't let me. Just I have to do the deuces.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man. I'm like, okay, so there's like this shitty little photo of me and Sakuraba. I got this big little smile on my face, like, oh. Sakuraba's just there, like, okay. But he was really cool, man. Like, I walked out of there just like the stuff that he taught.
Yeah.
Like that was just like 40 minutes and like 5 drills. Imagine like being under that learning tree. So I do recommend, if you need to look back into the past of MMA, check out Sakuraba, check out Bas Rutten. They're my 2 favorites. There's like so many other people that I haven't hit on, and I know we're getting short on time now, but fuck man, even if it's off camera, I'm more than happy to keep talking about the past. Yeah. And I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, definitely, at least in a time like this when there's not new content, not the worst thing to understand.
Well, I hope in this time too, like now that, there is a shortage of new content, I hope you do come across, I hope you can teach me some stuff. Hey man, did you see that fight? Oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah. Like, I've been watching a lot of older fights from the guys just to analysis what the new... Like, for example, I've been watching a lot of Justin Gaethje's fights and a lot of Tony's fights just to see how it can go in. And it's interesting for, like you said in Capoeira, for something that's so dynamic and it's the reaction of it determines how the outcome is.
Yeah.
A lot of people have the same... it's like in life. You can't... A tiger can't change his stripes a lot of times.
There's
like
a mold.
There's a mold, or there's a way that people finish it, and there's a certain sort of way. So... as with a lot of things, if you prepare, you do the hard yards, you do the research, and that you can you can do a lot, but like it requires like you actually spending time to do that.
Yeah, find what you like and let it kill you.
Yeah, that's the way. If COVID won't.
Protect your neck. Wu-Tang forever.
Oh man! All right, buddy. Like, thanks for that. Obviously, there's a lot more we can chat about, but need to condense it.
Anytime, man. Anytime you need a filler episode, I will be the worst interview ever.
We need to do one with like just a shirtless pics of just bicep curls.
I got told that I should do this with our shirts off. Somebody said to me, hey, do it with your shirt off.
It definitely wasn't me.
I'll subscribe. And I was like, I'll see what I can do.
Sub to the channel, guys, if you haven't already. Just going to look at the camera there.
Get all your angles.
Anyway, man. Cheers, guys. Peace.